That's right, we're back, Suka. Episode 2 of the out-of-fucking-nowhere top-tier retro shooter HROT just landed, and I'm gonna be honest, if you thought Episode 1 was kinda weird, brace yourself. Episode 2, entitled The Degustation, is named after a French style of sampling menu, where you can enjoy a multitude of different cuisines, each a small enough portion to not spoil your appetite for the next plate. True to that title, this episode isn't just a heaping helping of seconds, but a brand new spin on the dish that won us over to begin with. Look, this game is loaded with food metaphors. The first episode ended with the recipe for beef goulash. What do you want from me? Subtlety? Fuck off. Replaying episode 1 from the top, just to get a feel for the main changes, it's worth noting that although the essential look and feel of the game hasn't changed greatly from the last time, the soundtrack has some extensive reworking courtesy of Jelos, a dark ambient drone artist previously heard on the Hotline Miami 2 soundtrack. Revisiting levels which I had previously praised for their existing audio, it took a while for my opinion to settle on precisely how I felt about moving in this new direction. The original audio, placeholder though it may have been, had a distinctively John Carpenter-esque charm to it. Dramatic throbbing synths and swirling orchestral strings that felt almost hallucinatory in how they plastered this sense of sweaty unease over the world being laid out before the player. In contrast, Jealous' score is more industrial in tone, closer to the work Trent Reznor did on Quake, packed with fuzzy, chaotic bass tones marching to a more relentless, driving beat. While I personally enjoyed the slightly more over-the-top flair that the original score had, I can't deny that the new tracks suit the oppressively dark and brutal tone that forms the core of HROT's main aesthetic. In an ideal future, we'll get the choice of both, or at the very least a purchasable soundtrack to go along with the complete game. I say this as someone who still has the full Dusk OST on his phone. Endless slaps and I will hear no more against this. And speaking of new sounds... Perfect. No notes. You may also notice the addition of an irregular crackling, the kind you'd expect to hear from a Geiger counter, which flares up at points throughout many of the levels. While at first I was under the impression that this was some kind of in-universe secret hunting tool, it ultimately appears to be a simple addition to the ambient soundscape, with certain locations being hotter than others because... well, if you're not sure why 1986 might not have been a good year to be in the western bloc of the USSR, you might want to read up on that. The real meat of the new content lies in the gameplay, where several weapons have now been added or otherwise significantly altered. For one, the Hussite shotgun has superseded the rocket launcher as the game's primary explosive ranged weapon. Given that the earlier version of the Hussite shotgun was more of a railgun without the benefit of hit scan, it made sense to make some kind of change there, but I have to concede that simply getting rid of the actual period-consistent weapon and having the player launch grenades out of a fucking musket is such an unassailable flex I can't really bring myself to dislike it. Also on the chopping block is the only recently added lightning ball gun, another victim of redundancy when compared to the stream-based original that already existed. Instead, the original lightning gun now chains to any other nearby enemies, causing damage to the whole group rather than hosing down a single target. While it still burns through ammo at an eye-watering rate, it's now actually useful enough in some of the larger battles to make it a viable alternative to using explosives. There's another weapon which we'll introduce properly when we come to it in the full breakdown, but before we get into anything more spoilerific, credit has to go to a brand new addition to HROT's arsenal. Alcoholism. Given how often HROT really likes to slap you across the cheeks in some of these later encounters, one of the biggest challenges had always been figuring out whether or not to grab a healing item now to top off, or wait until you actually needed it. Now, portable healing is available one swig at a time in the form of a bottle of your finest Busek Zvrdatik, I think I got that right, a Czech wine still sold today and, by the looks of it, most likely for its incredibly powerful restorative qualities. Each pull from the bottle tops your health up by 10 points, with overhealing slowly ticking away over time along with your increasingly skewed vision. The fact that this is how HROT decides to do portable healing instead of the already in-game medkits is just a perfect example of why this game isn't just a challenging and gritty FPS, but a disarmingly funny one as well. Eyeing up a potential arena or ambush and pausing to slam back a few mouthfuls of liquid courage before rushing in there anyway feels very authentically Slavic. After all, if I know I'm going to get my ass kicked, it's sure as hell not going to be while I'm sober. With these changes in place, my return to episode 1 remained pretty consistently challenging. Playing on hard mode definitely wasn't made any easier with its inclusion, though on reflection it may have also been due to the fact that early on I was very rusty. The only other new addition of note to the core game is the introduction of a mighty boot, a Mighty BLYAT if you will, bound to the shift key, which... God damn it. The kick is a nice addition to the core combat plot in that while it's not absolutely vital in the same way that it is in, say, Postal Brain Damaged, it's a quick and effective way to break boards, bust open containers, and in a pinch will actually punt enemies back a fair distance. The snag there is that if you're actually letting anything get that close to you on hard or above, you're probably seconds away from getting yourself killed. Melee-specific enemies in particular often hit you the second they're within range, so baiting them in for a kick really has no upside to it other than simply wanting to punt a dog in the face. Which does admittedly have its own appeal. However, it does have the rather cool side effect of allowing you to take much more advantage of environmental hazards, particularly the water, which now drowns enemies who fall into it. If you've ever played classic boomer shooters like Blood or Duke Nukem, you'll already be aware of the exquisite agony of fighting ranged enemies underwater, especially hit scanners, so for HROT to make a consideration that actually lends a little more creativity to the combat is a very welcome touch. So, with these improvements in mind, and without wanting to get into spoiler territory just yet, is Episode 2 any good? Yes, that's such a stupid thing to ask. Why would you even ask? While Episode 1 felt more like a violent yet comedic whistle-stop tour of several of Czechoslovakia's more prominently Soviet institutions, where cosmonauts Slav-squatting from low Earth orbit and levitating Lenin heads were common occurrence, Episode 2 feels like HROT moving closer towards its cultural Czech roots and in turn shifting the tone away from the urban to more of a dark folk vibe, full of curses, cultists, and alliteration wasn't my strong point. Consternation? Sure, let's go with that. Beyond the tone, the one thing that Episode 2 definitely brings to the fore is a significantly nastier bag of tricks, traps and ambushes compared to the comparatively tame first episode. Quick save often, and be prepared for the occasionally outright rude moment of the game tricking and or fucking with you in some sudden and unpleasant way. Yet despite that, the whole experience remains fairly balanced, though punishing to unwary players who rush in unprepared. Take your time, know which weapon will suit the occasion, use your surroundings intelligently, and for the love of God, hunt down every fucking secret you can. Oh, come on! All in all, it's another glowing recommendation. If you haven't picked it up already, and holy shit, why haven't you? It's on sale on Steam as of right now for a shade over 12 quid, and I can promise you it's absolutely worth more than that. So, with that out of the way, if you want to enjoy the latest that HROT has to suffer without any spoilers, now is the time to run off and savour it for yourself. Should you not mind spoilers, or simply want a more thorough look into what lies in store for you, I'll catch you after the break.
Northern Slovakia is mountainous. Two of its main assets are lumber and sheep.
Točník Castle lays the foundations for what the rest of the Degustation is going to feel like. Distinctly darker, more arcane, and with a greater emphasis on making you work for your ammo. Beginning the level outside the castle itself, we, Okay, that's new. Distractions aside, once we open the main gate, we're immediately assaulted by one of the new common enemies we'll encounter throughout the episode, Headsmen. Contrary to the names I made up last time, the game now actually has a full bestiary for me to refer to for names, even if the names are about a 50-50 split of English to Czech, so take some of my translations somewhat loosely. The headsmen are weak, numerous, and come in two distinct varieties. Axe swingers who rush into melee and lob the occasional grenade if you stray too far, and their shotgun-wielding long-range counterparts. Our first headsman also has the courtesy to furnish us with the new Brno Super Shotgun. I've got to love any game that calls it a super shotgun and not just a double barrel. As it was in the first episode, it's a slow-firing powerhouse, absolutely deserving of the name, capable of jibbing most standard enemies at point-blank range, but with enough for a scatter and a slow enough reload to make the original pump action still viable. Also, something I didn't quite catch the first time, but was mentioned in the patch notes, it now stops you from quick-throwing grenades while it's reloading, unlike the regular shotgun. Simple, smart changes to give each weapon its own unique set of strengths and weaknesses. It's just good goddamn game design, and I love to see it. Blowing a few more headsmen away, we're able to explore the castle grounds and quickly pick up the other new weapon for the episode, the crossbow. Taking up the old role the Hussite shotgun had filled in earlier builds, it's your typical hard-hitting, long-range sniping tool with a firing rate that's fast enough to remain useful even when the fights get a little more close and personal. The only complaint I had was how far back in the weapon bar it sits, when it honestly could have made a decent alternate slot for the Hussite shotgun. Oh no, hang on. I stand corrected. Nice. The meat of this first level is simple enough. Hunting down switches to open up new locations, finding keys, digging up secrets. Oh, they fixed it? Alright, fine. Secrets. Given how liberal the game is with stashing things around each level, I can't throw shade on HROT for not being fair with them. Almost every secret in each level has some telltale sign or outright prompt for you to start hunting down a false wall or hidden circuit breaker to shoot. It's just that in the middle of everything, I developed some pretty bad tunnel vision and missed some pretty blatant clues. Appreciating a little fine art in the chapel, spelunking through some caves, and battling the medieval equivalent of a tank division, which, if you're keeping track, is made trivial by grabbing the weapon power-up behind the cracked wall just here, we grab our final key and unlock the catacombs below the castle. What the fuck was that? Oh, come on now! Okay, right, should have seen that coming. Oh, fuck off, really? Okay, does anything else down here want to fucking murder me? Oh, of course. Yeah, this final section does the best job hammering home quite how mean HROT is about to get in this episode. Close quarters fights against tough, aggressive mini-boss enemies, large-scale arena fights, and some pretty evil traps to catch out the overconfident. Still, we get through the worst of it, smack down that scram button, and move on to... yeah, so I think this might be why my Geiger counter is going apeshit. Uranium Mine is built around one central goal, using a mining shuttle to bypass several checkpoints to get back up to the surface while just about everything tries to fucking kill you. Enemy placement ranges from tactical to outright bloody cheeky, such as this kamikaze enemy jumping you from the other side of a newly opened door. Not the first time the game's gonna pull that one. Or this moment shortly afterwards where... well, see for yourself. Did that motherfucking boulder just chase me around a motherfucking corner? Turns out the boulders aren't physics objects. They don't follow a scripted path. They're enemies. They will literally chase you. That is evil. Evading it on the second try, genuinely expecting it to somehow follow me up a fucking ladder, the rest of the level is a genuinely enjoyable mixture of exploration and battles that exploit the cramped confines of the mine to great effect. The way in which the enemies spawn behind you at key moments doesn't feel like cheap padding so much as it feels like reinforcements closing in on your position, cutting off your routes of escape and hunting you down. Anyway, having evaded sentient mineral deposits and cut my way through dozens of heavily armed liquidators, we get the shuttle up and running and enjoy the most violent miniature railway ride imaginable. Well, if you wanted Slav Half-Life, I guess you came to the right place. Now, will we... fuck! Like I said, not the first time. Despite handling like a game from the era of bunny-hopping retro shooters, HROT definitely has this sense of shifting gears between slower, more tense survival horror progress and all-out arena blasting versus waves of enemies at a time. Case in point, having reached the end of the line, we catch a ride to the surface and begin our first real full-on brawl of the episode. Tearing through multiple waves of various enemies, we get a real taste of how well these enemy types intermingle and adjust the way the combat flows depending on what you're facing. The horse and the miners rush you, denying you the luxury of time to place accurate shots, all the while the shotgunners, grenadiers, and floating heads press you from a distance. Strafe shoot, duck dip, dive and dodge your way through the melee, throw the switch, punch the button, and we are clear! Oh, fuck! Okay kids, now we're getting to the good stuff. By which I mean the absolutely ball-smackingly hard stuff. Opening outside a cemetery, the level begins innocently enough, blowing open the outer wall to get inside, then consuming, let me just check here, something in the ballpark of 3 to 5 times the recommended safe dose of psilocybin mushrooms, which might explain what happens next. With fungi found, we find the door to the chapel now mysteriously open, empty save a few candles, dusty pews, and an organ we can fiddle about with. Smoke on the water! Busting down the barred door at the end of the chapel, we descend into the crypts below, something I don't think anyone who has experimented with psychedelics would recommend. Nor would anyone else, but that's beside the point because it's time for HROT to get legitimately fucking creepy. That's not to say it hasn't managed to establish an effective tone beforehand. Back in Točník Castle, there's an area where you can clearly hear footsteps clomping around in the rafters above you, well after all enemies have been cleared in the level. Down in the uranium mine, there's sudden bursts of static from your Geiger counter or distant rumbling of seismic shifts that threaten to bring the ceiling down on your head. All of them do a great job of putting you in the right kind of headspace to be functionally on edge, but not outright terrified. Then this shit starts happening. I won't spoil anything major for the sake of wanting the rest of you to suffer along with me, but suffice it to say once you've found what you're looking for down there, the brawl back to the surface against waves of headsmen is a welcome relief in comparison. Blast the road bastards into clouds of viscera, snag as much ammo as you can, and escape back to... oh god, I really hope that's the psilocybin kicking back in. The graveyard is now swarming with skeletons, each of which requires a ton of punishment to put down, only for them to respawn within seconds of their dismembering. Don't waste your ammo, run like hell to the shack, dodging their projectiles which hit like a fucking truck for some reason. I have no idea what I did to piss them off. Alright, maybe that. Dipping and ducking, quick saving liberally at every opportunity, we scour the system for the final key. Oh, fuck! Hello, spiders. Yes, you're still as awful as you were the first time. Fuck off forever. Weave through the bone zone one final time. This level hates me. I mean, not that it's unfair. I even managed to take out the dump truck the first time I ran into it, but dear god does the difficulty curve come out of nowhere in this level. Case in point, these guys in wheelchairs that blast high-velocity barrages of green yop at you, which can do enough damage to be considered instant death on harder above. One of them is bad enough, but two in a row, while enemies are pressuring you from the rear, denying you space to dodge their attacks, is absolutely fucking diabolical. 10 out of 10, brilliant level, extremely memorable, caved my arsehole in like a suspiciously cheap kebab. Moving on. You'd be forgiven for forgetting Factory Farm is supposed to be set on a farm, thanks to about 80% of it being a maze of underground tunnels, maintenance vents and sewer systems, and for that reason it's why it's perhaps the least interesting of all the levels thus far. There's a few neat moments early on as you flood the lower levels to access a broken off ladder, then later you shuffle cranes around to make a bridge over a loading dock, but it's not until you suck fresh air again that things get more interesting. Is that a motherfucking tank? Well, alright then. This boss fight versus the tank is all about placement and agility. The splash damage on the turret alone is enough to wipe you out without the half-dozen shotgunners adding to the mix. Use them to block the tank's shots, pound it with the hand cannon until it's slagged, and for the love of God, don't stop moving. With that taken care of, exit through the chicken coop. Try and exit through the chicken coop. If I could have made one change to episode 2, it would have been to make the rest of this level more like this. Wacky brawls through a farmyard, fending off over-aggressive headless chickens with a shotgun. Think Orwell's Animal Farm mixed with The Evil Dead. Oh, holy shit, now I want that. All animals are dead, but some are more dead than others. Kašperk Castle is like Točník Castle on crack. And I do mean that in a good way. A constantly changing and evolving map where each firefight feels wholly individual and challenging rather than becoming an endless slog. Almost immediately throwing you into a face-to-face pit fight with yet another bear, the game doesn't let up for a minute, regularly repopulating cleared areas as you fight from section to section, including this particular gauntlet that,
Bring out the gimp.
I think the gimp's sleeping.
Well, I guess you just have to go wake him up now, won't you?
A fool would ask why the horse is wearing a gimp mask. A wise man understands that the answer isn't worth knowing. We're in for some bare back-to-back BDSM equestrian carnage here, with the riders rattling off up to half a dozen shots at a time. This is the kind of completely fucking weird, yet played straight oddness that I'd been craving. Now, you might be wondering, what's going on? Why was that horse dressed up like a leather daddy? Why has everyone seemingly gone crazy? What's our character's name? You misunderstand. There's no story because the dev didn't want to waste time on one. I quote the dev, literally from the game's Steam discussion page regarding the lore for HROT. For my previous game, I wrote a whole book of lore and spent a lot of money on translation. Duke Nukem cash emoji. But no one read it. That's when I decided to make storyless games. Dusk super shotgun emoji. The absolute fucking mad lad. Because it works. HROT is better left to the player speculating on what could be going on rather than there being a single concrete chain of events. This isn't a cynical, oh you wanted a story, well fuck you, of Hotline Miami 2, but a refreshingly honest, I couldn't be bothered to waste time and money on it. Although dripping in references to Czech culture and history, a full index of which is also on the Steam Guides page for the uninitiated, it doesn't waste time trying to convey much more than shit is fucked, you have a shotgun. Now, to give the dev their due, they are actually very competent as a writer. Leggy, their Grimrock-like pseudo-RPG, wasn't exactly dripping with extended universe lore, but it was well written and managed to convey a lot with only minimal outright exposition. Tragedy of Prince Rupert, the game in question which put the dev off making all that effort again, is joyously eccentric, a hand-illustrated twin-stick shooter which draws from some Jules Vernean turn-of-the-century whimsy to paint a picture of battling suitors blasting one another in their magnificent flying machines over the hand of a fair maiden. To be blunt, dude can flesh out a concept and make it work. Not every game needs a ton of backstory and fluff to sell the world it exists within if the world at its surface is so rich and granular that the player actively starts joining their own dots. The story that a level tells can sometimes be just as rich and layered as the narrative that joins them all together, and sometimes even richer. Case in point, just after we've sorted out Mr. Ed's harem, we delve back down into the castle's basement only to find ourselves setting off a trap that would be ludicrous if it wasn't so absolutely fucking lethal. Lowering a pillar to reveal the next key we need, what else but fucking snakes fall down from the ceiling and encircle you immediately, each one taking an absolute ridiculous level of punishment to put down and taking a big, big chunk out of your health with every single hit. It's nothing that a brace of grenades won't fix, but as ambushes go, it's so completely unexpected to think that in a Czech castle's wine cellar, some absolute maniac would go to the trouble of stashing a bunch of poisonous snakes in the rafters. Anyway, flooding the cellars, we return to the surface accompanied by this gorgeously oppressive, surging track for the final push to the exit, blasting headsmen into bloody chunks as we build up a head of steam going into the penultimate level. Well, pre-penultimate. You'll understand what I mean when we get there.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for! That's what it's all about! Woo!
I may not exactly love the Dobrošov fortress, but I sure as hell respect its commitment to fucking me over. Set in an unused World War II bunker system turned historical site, this level alternates between cramped tunnels that force you into enemy lines of fire, or seemingly safe locations purely made to lure you into a trap. See this gun emplacement? That's bait. See, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this is just a turret section, which is, pretty neat, right, expanding and trying new things all the time, but what you don't realise is that the moment you aggro the enemies outside, they'll come running in through the door to your left and catch you off guard. It's not unfair by any means. At this point, if you're not habitually quick-saving, then you deserve everything that's coming to you, but it is a clear sign that HROT is now actively aiming for the throat. These bullet hell wheelchair guys become increasingly common and turn up in some of the worst places possible to find, given how catching a fraction of their volley on hard will absolutely crater your health. In fact, I think I need to briefly mention that while damage output on the player's end seems reliably consistent, the damage enemies can put out ranges anywhere from mild bruising to blowing a hole clean through you. It's less noticeable in the lower tier enemies where damage may only vary by a point or two, but bigger guys are perfectly capable of two-shotting you if the RNG is on their side. I'm not sure if I outright dislike this, after all I'm choosing to play on the difficulty I'm on, but it can be mildly frustrating to think you're safe to enter a fight with less than full health, only to find yourself jibbed in a matter of seconds. And speaking of being jibbed in a matter of seconds... The Granny's Valley is much like visiting any other elderly relative. A confusing journey through rush hour traffic, contending with the local wildlife, and the ever-present sense that something terrible is about to happen. Oi! Cultist stole my bike, can't have shit in Czechoslovakia. Once again drawing from prominent elements of Czech culture, this time the widely known novel The Grandmother, while the level itself is decently challenging and fun to navigate, I think the main enjoyment I've taken from the plot in general can be summed up perfectly in how this level is made. References to the book, both overt and subtle, are situated throughout the area, even when they're perhaps not entirely in keeping with the tone of the original text. But there's this cozy sense of familiarity that comes through in games like this, where the developer isn't just stamping down a vague tonal template on top of a preconceived experience, but building it from the ground up with a real desire to make something in such a way. Dodging potential spoilers that I'd rather have you experience firsthand, I will warn you ahead of time that the final battle you'll encounter at the end of this level is the most balls-out rampage of the game thus far. Thanks to my chronic lack of secret hunting ability, I was already pressed for ammo by this point, and having missed the weapon power-up just before the fight, I ended up only surviving by sheer luck after the final gimp horse stumbled into the water and drowned. Oh, and speaking of horses... Tunnel is a little disappointingly short for what it is, but as a proof of concept, I could absolutely see this being used as a basis for a more fully realised level in the third episode. Set on a cargo train hurtling through an underground tunnel, I have to once again remind everyone that you're looking at a game built on fucking Pascal, rendering an infinite tunnel loop. The level itself is exactly what I'd expect from a train stage, linear and flanked with instant death drops for you and your enemies alike if you stray too close to the edge. In fact, I gave a kicking only run of the level a try, but I'm going to call that a skill issue and leave it to someone better than me to try. Now, of course, all of this has just been an appetizer before... The Degustation isn't so much a full level as it is a dedicated boss arena, but it doesn't waste any time to set the stage. Arriving in an eerily quiet part of the palace from the end of the previous level, all that remains here are a few dead bodies and an absolute plethora of guns and ammo, all of which should be already setting off serious alarm bells for anyone remotely familiar with boomer shooters. Things are about to get... weird. Weirder. Gustav! It's been a minute! Mwah! Man, did I have a bad time with this fight. Gustav himself just floats around the place, dealing no direct damage, but instead spawning an unending horde of enemies to harry you around the arena. Again and again I fought valiantly, but simply didn't have the ammo reserves to fend them all off. On this high difficulty, the combat economy bleeds you of resources with almost no way of actually getting ahead unless you can find actual ammo pickups. Which, as it turns out, was kind of the point. Instead, ignore the mobs that Gustav spawns and just dump everything into him. Even starting vanilla with the default pistol and grenade, I was able to gun him down with just the ammo provided in the level once I learned to stop worrying and just circle strafe the motherfucker into oblivion. And with that, episode 2 comes to a close with a recipe for cauliflower brain. Alright, sure. I've got to make one of these one day. I don't think I really need to belabor the point anymore. If you're wondering if it's worth getting HROT, yes, go and buy it. How did you get to the end of this video and not think I was going to recommend it? I recommended it like fucking 10 minutes ago. Go and buy it now! And that's basically it. I can't really think of a good enough sign-off for this horribly overlong video, so I guess I'm just going to say thank you very much for watching, and, goodbye.